Plainly, the king and queen concluded afterward, some other bride must needs be found for Vagan. Briefly, they considered their younger daughters. Princess Sarah was 6 years old in 73 AC, Princess Visera only 2. Vagan has never looked twice at either one of them, Alysanne told the king. I am not sure he is aware that they exist. Perhaps if some maester wrote about them in a book. I shall tell Grand Maester Alysanne to commence tomorrow, the king japed. Then he said, he is only 10. He does not see girls, no more than they see him, but that will change soon. He is comely enough, and a prince of Westeros, third in line to the Iron Throne. In a few more years maidens will be fluttering around him like butterflies and blushing if he deigns to look their way. The queen was unconvinced. Comely was perhaps too generous a word for Prince Vagan, who had the silver gold hair and purple eyes of the Targaryens, but was long of face and round of shoulder even at 10, with a pinched sour cast to his mouth that made men suspect he had recently been sucking on a lemon. As his mother, her grace was mayhaps blind to these flaws, but not to his nature. I fear for any butterfly that comes fluttering round Vagan. He is like to squash it flat beneath a book. He spends too much time in the library, Jachaerys said. Let me speak to Balon. We will get him out into the yard, put a sword in his hand and a shield on his arm, that will set him right. Grand Maester Alysanne tells me that his grace did indeed speak to Prince Balon, who dutifully took his brother under his wing, marched him out into the yard, put a sword into his hand and a shield upon his arm. It did not set him right. Vagan hated it. He was a miserable fighter, and he had a gift for making everyone around him miserable as well, even Balon the Brave. Balon persisted for a year, at the king's insistence. The more Hedrills, the worse he looks, the spring prince confessed. One day, mayhaps in an attempt to spur Vagan into making more of an effort, he brought his sister Alyssa to the yard, shining in man's mail. The princess had not forgotten the incident of the arbor gold. Laughing and shouting mockery, she danced around her little brother and humiliated him 100 times, whilst Princess Daela looked down from a window. Shamed beyond endurance, Vagan threw down his sword and ran from the yard, never to return. We shall return to Prince Vagan, and his sister Daela, in due course, but let us turn now to a joyful event. In 74 AC, King Jachaerys and Queen Alysanne were blessed again by the gods when Prince Aemon's wife, the Lady Jocelyn, presented them with their first grandchild. Princess Rhaenys was born on the 7th day of the 7th moon of the year, which the Septons judged to be highly auspicious. Large and fierce, she had the black hair of her Baratheon mother and the pale violet eyes of her Targaryen father. As the firstborn child of the Prince of Dragonstone, many hailed her as next in line for the Iron Throne after her father. When Queen Alysanne held her in her arms for the first time, she was heard to call the little girl, our queen-to-be. In breeding, as in so much else, Balon the Brave was not far behind his brother Aemon. In 75 AC, the Red Keep was the site of another splendid wedding, as the spring prince took to bride the eldest of his sisters, Princess Alyssa. The bride was 15, the groom 18. Unlike their father and mother, Balon and Alyssa did not wait to consummate their union. The betting that followed their wedding feast was the source of much ribald humor in the days that followed, for the young bride's sounds of pleasure could be heard all the way to Duskendale, men said. A Shire maid might have been abashed by that, but Alyssa Targaryen was as bawdy a wench as any barmaid in King's Landing, as she herself was fond of boasting. I mounted him and took him for a ride, she declared the morning after the betting, and I mean to do the same tonight. I love to ride. Nor was her brave prince the only mount the princess was to claim that year. Like her brothers before her, Alyssa Targaryen meant to be a dragon rider, and sooner rather than later. Aemon had flown at 17, Balon at 16. Alyssa meant to do it at 15. According to the tales set down by the Dragonkeepers, it was all that they could do to persuade her not to claim Balerion. He is old and slow, princess, they had to tell her. Surely you want a swifter mount. In the end they prevailed, and Princess Alyssa ascended into the sky upon Melis, a splendid scarlet she-dragon, never before ridden. Red maidens, the two of us, the princess boasted, laughing, but now we've both been mounted. The princess was seldom long away from the dragon pit after that day. Flying was the second sweetest thing in the world, she would oft say, and the very sweetest thing could not be mentioned in the company of ladies. The Dragonkeepers had not been wrong. Melis was as swift a dragon as Westeros had ever seen, easily outpacing Caraxes and Vhagar when she and her brothers flew together. Meanwhile, the problem of their brother Vagan persisted, to the queen's frustration. The king had not been entirely wrong about the butterflies. As the years passed and Vagan matured, young ladies at the court began to pay him some attention. Age, and some uncomfortable discussions with his father and his brothers, had taught the prince the rudiments of courtesy, and he did not squash any of the girls, to the queen's relief. But he took no special notice of any of them either. Books remained his only passion: history, cartography, mathematics, languages. Grand Maester Alysanne, never a slave to propriety, confessed to having given the prince a volume of erotic drawings, thinking mayhaps that pictures of naked maidens comporting with men and beasts and one another might kindle Vagan's interest in the charms of women. The prince kept the book, but showed no change in behavior. It was on Prince Vagan's 15th nameday in 78 AC, a year short of his manhood, that Jachaerys and Alysanne broached the obvious solution to the Grand Maester. Do you think mayhaps Vagan might have the makings of a maester? No, Alysanne replied bluntly. Can you see him instructing some lord's children how to read and write and do simple sums? Does he keep a raven in his chamber, or any sort of bird? Can you imagine him removing a man's crushed leg, or delivering a baby? All these are required of a maester. The Grand Maester paused, then said, Vagan is no maester. But he could well have the makings of an archmaester in him. The Citadel is the greatest repository of knowledge in the known world. Send him there. Mayhaps he will find himself in the library. That, or he'll get so lost amongst the books that you never need to concern yourselves with him again. His words struck home. 3 days later, King Jachaerys summoned Prince Vagan to his solar to tell him that he would be taking ship for Aldtown in a fortnight. The Citadel will take charge of you, His Grace said. It is for you to determine what becomes of you. The prince responded curtly, as was his wont. Yes, father. Good. Afterward Jachaerys told the queen that he thought Vagan had almost smiled. Prince Baelon had not ceased smiling since his marriage. When not aloft, Baelon and Alyssa spent every hour together, most often their bedchamber. Prince Baelon was a lusty lad, for those same shrieks of pleasure that had echoed through the halls of the Red Keep on the night of their bedding were heard many another night in the years that followed. And soon enough, the much hoped for result appeared, and Alyssa Targaryen grew great with child. In 77 AC she gave her brave prince a son they named Jachaerys. Septon Barth described the boy as a plump and pleasant lad, who laughed more than any babe I've ever known, and nursed so lustily he drank his wet nurse dry. Against all advice, his mother clapped the boy in swaddling clothes, strapped him to her chest, and took him aloft on Melis when he was 9 days old. Afterward she claimed Jachaerys giggled the whole while. Bearing and delivering a child may be a joy for a young woman of 10 and 7. Like the Princess Alyssa, but it is quite another matter for one of 40, like her mother, Queen Alysanne. The joy was therefore not entirely unalloyed when her grace was found to be pregnant once again. Prince Valerian was born in 77 AC, after another troubled labor that saw Alysanne confined to her bed for half a year. Like his brother Gaemon 4 years earlier, he was a small and sickly babe, and never thrived. Half a dozen wet nurses came and went to no avail. In 78 AC, Valerian died, a fortnight short of his first nameday. The queen took his passing with resignation. I am 42 years old, she told the king. You must be content with the children I have given you. I am more suited to be a grandmother than a mother now, I fear. King Jachaerys did not share her certainty. Our mother, Queen Alyssa, was 46 when she gave birth to Jocelyn, he pointed out to Grand Maester Alysanne. The gods may not be done with us. He was not wrong. The very next year, the Grand Maester informed Queen Alysanne that she was once more with child, to her surprise and dismay. Princess Gale was born in 80 AC, when the queen was 44. Called the Winter Child, for the season of her birth, and because the queen was in the winter of her childbearing years, some said she was small, pale, and frail, but Grand Maester Alysanne was determined that she would not suffer the fate of her brothers Gaemon and Valerian. Nor did she. Assisted by Septa Lyra, who watched over the babe night and day, Alysanne nursed the princess through a difficult first year, until finally it seemed as if she might survive. When she reached her first nameday, still healthy if not strong, Queen Alysanne thanked the gods. She was thankful as well that year to have finally arranged a marriage for her 8th-born child, the Princess Daela. With Vagan settled, Daela had been next in line, but the tearful princess presented an entirely different sort of problem. My little flower, was how the queen described her. Like Alysanne herself, Daela was small on her toes. She stood 5 feet 2 inches and there was a childish aspect to her that led everyone who met her to think she was younger than her age. Unlike Alysanne, she was delicate as well, in ways the queen had never been. Her mother had been fearless. Daela always seemed to be afraid. She had a kitten that she loved until he scratched her, then she would not go near a cat. The dragons terrified her, even Silverwing. The mildest scolding would reduce her to tears. Once, in the halls of the Red Keep, Daela had encountered a prince from the Summer Isles in his feathered cloak, and squealed in terror. His black skin had made her take him for a demon. Cruel though her brother Vaegon's words had been, there was some truth to them. Daela was not clever, even her septa had to admit. She learned to read after a fashion, but haltingly, and without full comprehension. She could not seem to commit even the simplest prayers to memory. She had a sweet voice, but was afraid to sing. She always got the words wrong. She loved flowers, but was frightened of gardens. A bee had almost stung her once. Jachaerys, even more than Alysanne, despaired of her. She will not even speak to a boy. How is she to marry? We could entrust her to the faith, but she does not know her prayers, and her septa says that she cries when asked to read aloud from the 7-pointed star. The queen always rose to her defense. Daela is sweet and kind and gentle. She has such a tender heart. Give me time, and I will find a lord to cherish her. Not every Targaryen needs to wield a sword and ride a dragon. In the years that followed her first flowering, Daela Targaryen drew the eye of many a young lordling, as expected. She was a king's daughter, and maidenhood had only made her prettier. Her mother was at work as well, arranging matters in every way she could to place suitable marriage prospects before the princess. At 13 Daela was sent to Driftmark to meet Corlys Velaryon, the grandson to the Lord of the Tides. 10 years her elder, the future sea snake was already a celebrated mariner and captain of ships. Daela became seasick crossing Blackwater Bay, however, and on her return complained that, "He likes his boats better than he likes me." She was not wrong in that. At 14, she kept company with Dennis Swan, Simon Staunton, Gerald Templeton, and Ellard Crane, all promising squires of her own age, but Staunton tried to make her drink wine and Crane kissed her on the lips without her leave, reducing her to tears. By year's end Daela had decided she hated all of them. At 15, her mother took her across the Riverlands to Raventry, in a wheelhouse, as Daela was afraid of horses where Lord Blackwood entertained Queen Alysanne lavishly whilst his son paid court to the princess. Tall, graceful, courtly, and well-spoken, Royce Blackwood was a gifted bowman, a fine swordsman, and a singer, who melted Daela's heart with ballads of his own composition. For a short while it seemed as if a betrothal might be in the offing, and Queen Alysanne and Lord Blackwood even began to discuss wedding plans. It all fell to pieces when Daela learned that the Blackwoods kept the old gods, and she would be expected to say her vows before a weirwood. They don't believe in the gods, she told her mother, horrified. I'd go to hell. Her 16th nameday was fast approaching, and with it her womanhood. Queen Alysanne was at her wit's end, and the king had lost his patience. On the first day of the 80th year since Aegon's conquest, he told the queen he wanted Daela wed before the year's end. If she wants I can find 100 men and line them up before her naked, and she can pick the one she likes, he said. I would sooner she wed a lord, but if she prefers a hedge knight or a merchant or Pate the pig boy, I am past the point of caring, so long as she picks someone. 100 naked men would frighten her, Alysanne said, unamused. 100 naked ducks would frighten her, the king replied. And if she will not wed? The queen asked. Maegil says the faith will not want a girl who cannot read her prayers. There are still the silent sisters, said Jachaerys. Must it come to that? Find her someone. Someone gentle, as she is. A kind man, who will never raise his voice or his hand to her, who will speak to her sweetly and tell her she is precious and protect her, against dragons and horses and bees and kittens and boys with boils and whatever else she fears. I shall do my best, your grace, Queen Alysanne promised. In the end it did not require 100 men, naked or clothed. The queen explained the king's command to Daela gently but firmly, and offered her a choice of 3 suitors, each of whom was eager for her hand. Pate the pig boy was not amongst them. It should be said, the 3 men that Alysanne had selected were great lords or the sons of great lords. Whichever man she married, Daela would have wealth and position, Boromund Baratheon was the most imposing of the candidates. At 8 and 20, the Lord of Storm's End was the image of his father, brawny and powerful, with a booming laugh, a great black beard, and a mane of thick black hair. As the son of Lord Rogar by Queen Alyssa, he stood half-brother to Alysanne and Jachaerys, and Daela knew and loved his sister, Jocelyn, from her years at court, which was thought to be much in his favor. Sir Tymond Lannister was the wealthiest contender, heir to Castle Rock and all its gold. At 20, he was nearer to Daela's own age, and thought to be one of the handsomest men in all the realm, lithe and slender, with long golden mustachios and hair of the same hue, always clad in silk and satin. The princess would be well protected in Castle Rock. There was no castle more impregnable in all Westeros. Weighed against Lannister gold and Lannister beauty, however, was Sir Tymond's own reputation. He was overly fond of women, it was said, and even more fond of wine. Last of the three, and least in many eyes, was Roderick Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie and Protector of the Vale. He had been a lord since the age of 10, a point in his favor. For the past 20 years he had served on the small council as Lord Justiciar and Master of Laws, during which time he had become a familiar figure about court, and a leal friend to both king and queen. In the Vale he had been an able lord, strong but just, affable, open-handed, loved by the small folk and his lord's bannermen alike. In addition, he had acquitted himself well in King's Landing, sensible, knowledgeable, good-humored, he was regarded as a great asset to the council. Lord Arryn was the oldest of the three contenders, however, at 6 and 30, he was 20 years older than the princess, and a father besides, with 4 children left him by his late first wife. Short and balding, with a kettle belly, Arryn was not the man most maidens dream of, Queen Alysanne admitted, but he is the sort you asked for, a kind and gentle man, and he says that he has loved our little girl for years. I know he will protect her. To the astonishment of every woman at the court, save mayhaps the queen, Princess Daela chose Lord Roderick to be her husband. Nay, seems good and wise, like father, she told Queen Alysanne, and he has 4 children. I'm to be their new mother. What her grace thought of that outburst is not recorded. Grand Maester Alysar's account of the day says only, "Gods be good." Theirs would not be a long betrothal. As the king had wished, Princess Daela and Lord Roderick were wed before year's end. It was a small ceremony in the Sept at Dragonstone, attended only by close friends and kin. Larger crowds made the princess desperately uncomfortable. Nor was there a bedding. "Oh, I could not bear that, I should die of shame," the princess had told her husband-to-be, and Lord Roderick had acceded to her wishes. Afterward, Lord Arryn took his princess back to the Eyrie. "My children need to meet their new mother, and I want to show the Vale to Daela. Life is slower there, and quieter. She will like that. I swear to you, your grace, she will be safe and happy." And so she was, for a time. The eldest of Lord Roderick's 4 children from his first wife was a daughter, Ellis, 3 years older than her new stepmother. The 2 of them clashed from the first. Daela doted on the 3 younger children, however, and they seemed to adore her in turn. Lord Roderick, true to his word, was a kind and caring husband who never failed to pamper and protect the bride he called, "my precious princess." Such letters as Daela sent her mother, letters largely written for her by Lord Roderick's younger daughter. Amanda spoke glowingly of how happy she was, how beautiful the Vale, how much she loved her lord's sweet sons, how everyone in the Eyrie was so kind to her. Prince Aemon reached his 26th nameday in 81 AC, and had proved himself more than able in both war and peace. As the heir apparent to the Iron Throne, it was felt desirable that he take a greater role in the governance of the realm as a member of the King's Council. Accordingly, King Jachaerys named the prince his Justiciar and Master of Laws in place of Roderick Arryn. "One will leave the making of law to you, brother," Prince Balon declared, whilst drinking to Prince Aemon's appointment. "I would sooner make sons." And that was just what he did, for later that same year Princess Alyssa bore her spring prince a second son, who was given the name Daemon. His mother, irrepressible as ever, took the babe into the sky on Melis within a fortnight of his birth, just as she had done with his brother, Viserys. In the Vale, however, her sister Daela was not doing near as well. After a year and a half of marriage, a different sort of message arrived at the Red Keep by Raven. It was very short, and written in Daela's own uncertain hand. "I am with child," it said. "Mother, please come. I am frightened." Queen Alysanne was frightened too, once she read those words. She mounted Silverwing within days and flew swiftly to the Vale, alighting first in Gulltown before proceeding on to the Gates of the Moon, and then skyward to the Eyrie. It was 82 AC, and her grace arrived 3 moons before Daela was due to give birth. Though the princess professed delight that her mother had come, and apologized for sending her such a silly letter, her fear was palpable. She burst into tears for the slightest reason, and sometimes for no reason at all, Lord Roderick said. His daughter Ellis was dismissive, telling her grace, you would think she was the first woman ever to have a baby, but Alysanne was concerned. Daela was so delicate, and she was carrying very heavy. She is such a small girl for such a big belly, she wrote the king. I would be frightened too, if I were her. Queen Alysanne stayed beside the princess for the rest of her confinement, sitting by her bedside, reading her to sleep at night, and comforting her fears. It will be fine, she told her daughter, 100 times. She will be a girl, wait and see. A daughter. I know it. Everything will be fine. She was half right. Emma Arryn, the daughter of Lord Roderick and Princess Daela, came into the world a fortnight early, after a long and troubled labor. It hurts, the princess screamed through half the night. It hurts so much. But it is said she smiled when her daughter was laid against her breast. Everything was far from fine, however. Childbed fever set in soon after birth. Though Princess Daela desperately wished to nurse her child, she had no milk, and a wet nurse was sent for. As her fever rose, the maester decreed that she might not even hold her babe, which set the princess to weeping. She wept until she fell asleep, but in her sleep she kicked wildly and tossed and turned, her fever rising ever higher. By morning she was gone. She was 18 years of age. Lord Roderick wept as well, and begged the queen's permission to bury his precious princess in the Vale, but Alysanne refused. She was the blood of the dragon. She will be burned, and her ashes interred on Dragonstone beside her sister Daenerys. Daela's death tore the heart out of the queen, but as we look back, it is plain to see that it was also the first hint of the rift that would open between her and her king. The gods hold us all in their hands, and life and death are theirs to give and take away, but men in their pride look for others to blame. Alysanne Targaryen, in her grief, blamed herself and Lord Arryn and the Ares maester for their parts in her daughter's demise. But most of all, she blamed Jachaerys. If he had not insisted that Daela wed, that she'd pick someone before year's end, what harm would it have done for her to stay a little girl for another year or 2 or 10? She was not old enough or strong enough to bear a child, she told his grace back at King's Landing. We ought never have pushed her into marriage. It is not recorded how the king replied. The 83rd year after Aegon's conquest is remembered as the year of the Fourth Dornish War, better known amongst the small folk as Prince Morian's Madness, or the War of the Hundred Candles. The old Prince of Dorne had died, and his son, Morian Martell, had succeeded him in Sunspear. A rash and foolish young man, Prince Morian had long bristled at his father's cowardice during Lord Rogar's war, when knights of the Seven Kingdoms had marched into the Red Mountains unmolested whilst the Dornish armies stayed at home and left the Vulture King to his fate. Determined to avenge this stain on Dornish honor, the prince planned his own invasion of the Seven Kingdoms. Though he knew Dorne could not hope to prevail against the might that the Iron Throne could muster against him, Prince Morian thought that he might take King Jachaerys unawares, and conquer the Stormlands as far as Storm's End, or at very least Cape Wrath. Rather than attack by way of the Prince's Pass, he planned to come by sea. He would assemble his hosts at Ghost Hill and the Tor, load them on ships, and sail them across the Sea of Dorne to take the Stormlanders by surprise. If he was defeated or driven back, so be it. But before he went, he swore to burn 100 towns and raze 100 castles, so the Stormlanders might know that they could never again march into the Red Mountains with impunity. The madness of this plan can be seen in the fact that there are neither 100 towns nor 100 castles on Cape Wrath, nor even a third that number. Dorne had not boasted any strength at sea since Nymeria burned her 10,000 ships, but Prince Morian did have gold, and he found willing allies in the pirates of the Stepstones, the Sellsails of Myr, and the corsairs of the Pepper Coast. Though it took him the best part of a year, eventually the ships came straggling in, and the prince and his spearmen were loaded aboard. Morian had been weaned on the tales of past Dornish glory, and like many young Dornish lords he had seen the sun-mottled bones of the dragon Meryxes at the Hellholt. Every ship in his fleet was therefore manned with crossbowmen and equipped with massive scorpions of the sort that had felled Meryxes. If the Targaryens dared to send dragons against him, he would fill the air with bolts and kill them all. The folly of Prince Morian's plans cannot be overstated. His hopes of taking the Iron Throne unawares were laughable, for a start. Not only did Jachaerys have spies in Morian's own court, and friends amongst the shrewder Dornish lords, but the pirates of the Stepstones, the Selsales of Myr, and the corsairs of the Pepper Coast are none of them famed for their discretion. A few coins changing hands was all it took. By the time Morian set sail, the king had known of his attack for half a year. Boromund Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End, had been made aware as well, and was waiting on Cape Wrath to give the Dornishmen a red welcome when they came ashore. He would never have the chance. Jachaerys Targaryen and his sons Aemon and Baelon had been waiting as well, and as Morian's fleet beat its way across the Sea of Dorne, the dragons Vermithor, Caraxes, and Vhagar fell on them from out of the clouds. Shouts rang out, and the Dornish filled the air with scorpion bolts, but firing at a dragon is one thing, and killing it quite another. A few bolts glanced off the scales of the dragons, and one punched through Vhagar's wing, but none of them found any vulnerable spots as the dragon swooped and banked and loosed great blasts of fire. One by one the ships went up in gouts of flame. They were still burning when the sun went down, like 100 candles floating on the sea. Burned bodies would wash up on the shores of Cape Wrath for half a year, but not a single living Dornishman set foot upon the Stormlands. The Fourth Dornish War was fought and won in a single day. The pirates of the Stepstones, the Selsales of Myr, and the corsairs of the Pepper Coast became less troublesome for a time, and Mara Martell became the princess of Dorne. Back in King's Landing, King Jachaerys and his sons received a riotous welcome. Even Aegon the Conqueror had never won a war without losing a man. Prince Baelon had another cause for celebration as well. His wife, Alysanne, was again with child. This time, he told his brother Aemon, he was praying for a girl. Princess Alysanne was brought to bed again in 84 AC. After a long and difficult labor, she gave Prince Baelon a third son, a boy they named Aegon, after the conqueror. They call me Baelon the Brave, the prince told his wife at her bedside, but you are far braver than me. I would sooner fight a dozen battles than do what you've just done. Alysanne laughed at him. You were made for battles, and I was made for this. Jachaerys and Daemon and Aegon, that's 3. As soon as I am well, let's make another. I want to give you 20 sons. An army of your own. It was not to be. Alysanne Targaryen had a warrior's heart in a woman's body, and her strength failed her. She never fully recovered from Aegon's birth, and died within the year at only 24, nor did Prince Aegon long survive her. He perished half a year later, still shy of his first name day. Though shattered by his loss, Baelon took solace in the 2 strong sons that she had left him, Jachaerys and Daemon, and never ceased to honor the memory of his sweet lady with the broken nose and mismatched eyes.